Sentire Media.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy, where we dive into everything you need to know about life, travel, and the incredible journey of moving to Italy. I'm your host, Samantha Wilson, and today I'm going to explore a topic that many people really strive to accomplish, but often don't know exactly how to do it. And that is how to experience the authentic Italian life and how to do that through traveling to smaller towns and lesser known spots, and maybe living a little bit more like a local rather than sticking to the usual tourist destinations. Now, don't get me wrong, because I love Rome, I love Venice, and of course, I love Florence just as much as the next person. And they are all absolutely worth visiting. In fact, I think that everybody, if you have a chance, needs to see these three iconic cities at some point in their lives. But for those of you who are planning to actually move to Italy one day, or maybe you just simply want to experience a more authentic, laid-back version of Italian life, there is so much more to discover beyond these great big cities. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about how you can explore Italy through its smaller towns and off-the-beaten-path villages. I'm going to dive into how you can connect with a local culture, experience this slower pace of life, and really understand what it's like to live like an Italian. And to help me guide you through this conversation, I have invited two very special guests today. Zenaba Bowers, I call her Zen, and Matt Walker, and you may know them from Little Roads Europe. They are experts in finding these little gems and helping you experience traveling like a local here in Italy. So if you are planning your next Italian adventure, or you're already here and want to go beyond those Instagrammable spots and get a true account of what the Italian lifestyle is really like, stick around because this is going to be good. I'm Samantha Wilson, Chief Dreammaker at smartmoveitaly.com, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show where each week I take you behind the scenes of what it's really like to move to Italy, introduce you to some fascinating people, answer your questions, and show you how starting a new life in Bel Paese is possible for you. Well, welcome back. Now let's kick things off by discussing why you might want to skip the big cities and explore Italy's smaller towns and villages on your next vacation, or even on your recon trip to narrow down the best places for you to live in. You know, a lot of people do this. They come to Italy first on vacation, maybe a couple times, and then when they make the decision to actually move to Italy, then the shift changes. Then they start coming back and looking at it through a different set of eyes, looking at Italy to find the best place that's suited for them. So don't get me wrong, I absolutely recommend visiting places like Rome and Florence and Venice and even Milan, at least, like I say, once in your lifetime. But if you're considering a move to Italy, or you just want to get a deeper understanding of the Italian way, you will find that the real heart of Italy lies in its small towns. And I think it's important to take the time for at least one of your trips to Italy to spend time in these smaller, off-beaten places, these smaller, tiny towns. It will give you a better insight of the real life, including the real costs of living, like, you know, what it costs in a restaurant or in grocery stores, or maybe the local markets. Definitely how much property costs, because when you move here, you need a place to live. And you will definitely see a big difference between the price of, for example, a coffee and a croissant in the morning in a small town compared to what you're going to pay in the city. And you'll be able to determine what feels best for you, which one suits you. If you have the freedom and the flexibility to choose a small town over one of the big cities, then it's something you really should consider. One of the most significant differences between the big cities and the smaller towns to me is the pace of life. You know, we always know Italy is a lot slower than what we're used to, but it's even slower in these smaller towns. In cities like Rome, for example, it's really easy to get in there and get sort of buzzed and, you know, busy with all of the people. It's hectic in a lot of places. And although it's an iconic address to say you live in Rome, living in Rome means a different kind of a lifestyle. It could be a lot similar to what you're doing now. But when you travel to smaller towns and think about living in a smaller town, life definitely slows down. People take their time to enjoy the little things because they have more time. They can enjoy a longer lunch, a longer meal, a passeggiata, a leisurely walk in the evening, or even just a slow conversation with their neighbors. This is where you can truly see the Italian concept of la dolce vita in true action. Cities are like any city in the world. Italian cities have a lot of the same similarities. Of course, there's a little bit of, Italians where men in suits are eating ice cream, walking down the street in the afternoon. This is obviously Italy. But still, people are super busy. They're working. They're going from one place to another. They're battling traffic and crowds. So it's different. For most people, it turns out like in these cities, it turns out really not to be the dream that they had when they first thought about moving to Italy. And also, when you're in a small town, it's much easier to connect with the locals. And people tend to be a little more open and welcoming. And you'll find that you're not just another tourist passing through, because cities can be very transient. The people come and they go all the time. So it's harder to make friends with the locals, or even get the locals to open up, because they know, or they think at least, that you will probably be gone in a few weeks or a few months. So, why bother? You're just another foreigner moving through the motions. But in a small town, you could be invited to join a local sagra, like a little local festival, or attend a family dinner, or simply have just a chat over coffee in the local cafe. These are all the moments that will give you a real sense of what it's like to live in Italy, to have your new life in Italy. And these are the exact moments that drew my guests to Italy and what keeps them here. So Zen and her husband, Matt, are classical musicians, and not just any kind of musicians, my friends, but Grammy-nominated musicians. So these guys, have what it takes. And they had a great career and a life back in the U.S. But like so many people, they eventually found themselves that they needed more control over their futures. They needed more inspiration. They were kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And they felt like they needed to find this spark again, the spark in their life again. So they ended up in Italy on their honeymoon about 19 years ago. And then after, a few sleepless nights, they decided that Italy was their home. It was the place that they felt their best to be, their best selves. So they decided to get a visa. They ended up going for the self-employment visa. And this is, of course, the most difficult visa to get and can take a lot of time. So they held back on really doing anything until they got the green light. And their big idea was to get the visa, come to Italy, and continue to perform and produce these concerts all around Italy and Europe, and just, find this new inspiration. Well, the good news was they did get their visa, and then immediately, 6 weeks after, they sold everything. Their house, they packed up, they moved, and they ended up in Italy with, all of these ideas and excitement behind them. But almost immediately, the pandemic hit, which completely changed not only their dream, but their future plans. So what did they do? They turned their other love, and that was the love of travel, slow travel to be precise, and they began to curate unique, authentic trips to share with, themselves really, but also to share with others. And as time went on and the better they got, they realized that not only were they loving their new life and this approach to the Italian way and the Italian traveling life slowly, but so were so many other people. And so Little Roads Europe was formed. Now, I won't tell you much more. I'm going to let them tell their story. All right. Well, today we have a couple of guests that I have been really looking forward to this interview, because I will admit I have been following their blog for quite some time. And when I reached out to ask if they would mind being a guest on this show, I was so happy when they said yes. So I'm going to introduce you. It's Matt Walker and Zenaba. You can call her Zen Bowers, and they live here in Italy. They're American. They live here in Italy, and they've had a really interesting life and interesting journey, and even what they're doing now, which is what I want to talk about today with them. So welcome, Matt. Welcome, Zen.
Hi there. Thanks, Samantha.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. So, where are you guys sitting right now? Where are you in Italy?
We're sitting on our couch in our apartment in our town where we moved 5 years ago, which is called Soriano nel Cimino.
Oh,
The Cimino mountain is about an hour north of Rome, and our town is sitting right on the side of the mountain.
mm,
And so we're in Lazio.
okay.
Um,
Is it a small town?
it's about 8 or 9 thousand people, so fairly small, but very alive. It's a real town where real people work, and not a whole lot of tourism coming through,
Nice. Nice.
which
So,
was
real
exactly the kind of thing
authentic.
we were looking for when we did move.
Yeah,
Well, how,
it is 8,000 people, but that is, as we jokingly say, the greater Soriano area, which is not just the old part of the town where we pretty much are in the center, but all the surrounding small areas and like rural areas around as well. So maybe there's only a couple of thousand people that live here in where you would see them every day. And it's
oh,
enough people. When we picked our town, one of the things that we liked about it is that it felt very real. People live here. The stores and the restaurants are open year round because it is not a tourist destination, but people need to be able to shop and eat all the time. And there are three pharmacies here, which we thought was important because we were imagining when we get older, if we have to buy something embarrassing, we could just buy it at one pharmacy and then not go back to that place for at least a year.
that's so funny. Well, what made you go there? Because, I mean, was this on your itinerary? I mean, how long ago was it when you first found your place here in Italy?
The first time we set foot in this town was February of 2019. And we came here after visiting Italy probably 40 or 45 times over the previous 15 years, more or less before that. Some friends of ours who were also Italophiles recommended this town to us. They said, "Oh, you gotta go to Soriano. It's really great. It's really beautiful. It's just perfect." And we were a little bit skeptical because every American that visits any given small town in Italy thinks that is the best, most perfect place ever.
Hmm.
And so it could have been practically anywhere, right? But
Right. Yeah.
but these are good friends, and we trusted their judgment, and so we
Well, and we were already engaged by a newspaper to do an article about affordable travel. So we
Okay.
already had tickets, but we just weren't sure exactly where we were going to base ourselves. So we thought,
Hmm.
let's base ourselves in Soriano and write the article from there.
Great.
yeah
Okay. So,
we found an apartment to rent for a week for 300 euro, I think,
Yeah.
and for the entire week, a two-bedroom apartment with a full kitchen and
nice.
everything, right above literally above the center town square,
Oh,
the
so perfect
the
spot.
Piazza Centrale. And so this was the perfect place to experience the town. And it
Yeah.
really did check so many boxes of the kinds of things that we wanted to look for in a place to live,
Hmm.
that we had sort of gotten these ideas over the course of traveling here so many times previously.
Right.
A small size, not too touristed, close to Rome or close to a major airport, I should say, but not too close to the big city. Uh,
Hmm.
Availability of suitable shopping, groceries, and little shops.
Yeah,
Uh,
just a place to be home, like a real authentic lifestyle. You have
exactly.
everything
Yeah,
that you
and
need,
not
but
overrun with
yeah,
Americans or other tourists, so
Not
that it was people were still, so we wouldn't be finding like a Starbucks in it, for example.
yeah,
We didn't want that
exactly.
type of, yeah.
yeah.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, and there's so many of those, like you had said, there's a million of those, maybe not a million, maybe I'm exaggerating,
Mhm.
but there's thousands of those little towns that can be discovered in Italy. And if it's your place, if it's a place that you immediately feel comfortable in. And have you found this? Because I know we're going to talk about all the travel that you do and how you have that as part of your career, your business now. But when you're doing your traveling around, do you experience when you walk into a town, it can just look like any other hilltop town, let's say, medieval town, let's say, but everyone has a different vibe, has this kind of different feeling when you walk into it. Do you get that too?
Yeah, I think so. There's some of them feel very almost as if they're just museum pieces, and it doesn't feel very
Mm-hmm.
alive with people actually living there.
Yeah.
They're beautiful, and there may be a few shops here and there, and a couple of bars or restaurants, but it just doesn't feel. I keep using the word alive, and 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 that's maybe not quite the right word, because the opposite of that is dead, and that's not
Yeah.
exactly what we're talking about either. But
Mind you, some towns are dead. Come on.
well,
Some towns
yes, yes,
are
in some
completely
cases
dead.
they
Well, we love to visit those, and so the visiting of those is really spectacular and
Yeah.
memorable. But I'm not sure that personally I would be ready to live in one. It might just get emotional, I think, if you were there for long stretches of time, because you would feel like you were in a place that was forgotten.
like
And
a ghost town
yeah, and
kind
I
of thing.
think maybe I'm not quite ready for that yet.
Well,
So,
I think that takes a certain kind of living and lifestyle. And I think that when people are considering moving here, maybe they're coming from a very busy lifestyle. They're drawn to this idea of being super tranquil and super
mm,
quiet in these tiny little towns. But what you've pointed out is a really good thing for people to remember, in that they may feel very charming and almost romantic at the beginning to get in. It can become later on, when you really just have to live your life, it can become maybe not as comfortable as you thought it would be. You might be a little bit, disconnected from services or just life. This, like you said, Matt, this aliveness in your life. But so let me say, you are living in this town, this small town close to Rome, and tell me how you got here. Not how you traveled here, but you were both you both had very successful, I think you still have successful careers as professional musicians. So tell me a little bit about that, and maybe what led you from there to even thinking about Italy.
mm,
Well, those are sort of two parallel stories, I guess. One is that we've been professional classical musicians for close to 30 years, really, before we moved here, and we played for 20 years in the Nashville Symphony Orchestra in Tennessee. That's where we met there, and while we were there, Zanaba also founded a small chamber ensemble, of which I was a part. And she was the director of this ensemble for 16 years in
Mhm.
Nashville there, where in the course of doing that, we
mm.
uh, commissioned a lot of new works, I think like 30 or 35 new works from living composers. And it's hard to commission them from dead
Yeah,
composers,
right.
but so that's maybe redundant. But we recorded 4 CDs of new American music, including our first CD that got a Grammy nomination. And this
Congratulations.
was all a very shoestring kind of operation, but we did a lot of really good artistic work there, as well as working in the recording industry there. Um, and as I said, full time with the symphony. So we accumulated this sort of resume and set of credentials that that became the thing that the Italian government saw fit to give us work visas
but
for.
but during that, over the course of our careers, especially in the symphony, um, you love this music, and I in particular, I really do love orchestral music, and I do miss doing that here. But one of the issues that we knew, both of us as individual artists, that we knew was going to impact us over our careers was repetition.
Hmm.
So we would be playing Beethoven 5, for example, every year, probably every other year, and then several times each year. And there were certain pieces that were going to come up again and again. And it's hard to do those things over and over. If you imagine your favorite movie,
Hmm.
and then you imagine watching it 8 to 12 times every year, but with a director who tells you what you have to think and feel about it each time.
Hmm.
That's what it's like sometimes to be doing these pieces over and over again with a different conductor. And after a while, you start to feel like your passion for it is fading.
Right.
And that is something that we both saw happen to people older than us when we were young musicians. and we said, we're going to have to change or somehow do something different in our careers
Mhm.
so that we don't get there. And it was something we had thought about together for a long time. So I think we worked over the course of our careers to think about how, in the long term, how we might shift things.
Right.
Uh, and part of that was having this chamber ensemble so we could have this artistic output.
Right.
Part of that was doing some other volunteer work. Part of that was travel, but it was keeping your mind and your soul fed and active. And that was just something we really needed to think about. So,
Okay.
what we've done by moving to Italy is create a whole new set of challenges so we're definitely not bored.
Yeah,
Definitely not
I'm
repeating the
sure.
same stuff.
So it wasn't a pivotal moment, for example, when you knew it was time for a change for you. It was this progressive, constant reminder that maybe there's something else, or you need further
Yeah,
inspiration.
I I think at the same time that we were working in our music careers, we also started traveling together. What became a lot. We came to Italy for my first time on our honeymoon in 2006. And Zen had been here several times when she was college age doing festivals, for instance, Spoleto and a couple of other things in a couple of different places in Europe. But I had never been out of the country except out of the U.S. except for Canada. I'd never been
Mm.
overseas at all, so this was the first thing for me. And I especially, and I think at the same time Zen did too, fell in love with these smaller, out of the way places in
Mhm.
Italy. We started in Rome and we walked around Rome a bit, and then we got a rental car and set off towards Venice, and we ended in Venice. But it was all the stuff in between that really grabbed me, and I think grabbed Zen too,
Mhm.
because it just felt. It, it's an overused sort of turn of phrase, but it just felt more realistic, more authentic. The
Yeah.
places we were seeing in between these big tourist hotspots, and so we kept coming back again and again, 1 week at a time here, a week there, maybe 2 weeks if we were lucky to cobble together that much free time in a row.
Mhm.
Um, and we wound up coming here. Other places in Europe too. We went a lot to Ireland
Mhm.
and a couple of times to the UK and a couple of times to Germany. But most of the time, we were really drawn back, especially to Italy. And we
I think,
we developed this body of knowledge of a lot of different kinds of places away from the tourist hotspots, and that
Mhm.
sort of became the basis of what became our Little Roads Europe travel consulting business.
Right.
I
And
think
guidebooks
also,
too, right? I mean, you've
yeah,
created from all of this information and this experience, this firsthand experience, you've created these incredible guides
Yeah, the
to help
guidebooks we
people.
wrote were pretty much contemporaneous with the development of the consulting business for
Okay.
travelers. Yeah,
I think part of it is almost artistic in terms of like when we're here, we liked the feeling that we get when we would go home. Then after we'd been here, we felt like we were rejuvenated and with new sights and ideas. But while we were here, I think there are a few things that struck us because we were here 4 or 5 times a year, a week or two at a time. There were a few things that struck us culturally that made us say, I think we really belong there or we want to live there. And for example, the general feeling of safety that we had here.
Mhm.
When you see people arguing here or getting stressed, you're never worried that somebody's going to get shot.
Right.
And so that was just a fear that was overlaid in our life in the United States into every interaction that didn't happen here. And that is remarkable. And when you live in a place for a little bit of time and that fear is removed, it actually feels
It
like it
changes
changes
you.
the body.
Yeah, it
And I
does.
think we also appreciated the way that people live with the seasons here. So in the US, we were working indoors, and it was we were considered a little strange, I think, by some of our neighbors, because we hung our laundry outside in our backyard and we had our windows open for the
Mm-hmm.
most of the year, whereas most everybody around us lived in either air conditioning or heating
Mm-hmm.
the entire year. And so it's like the I think one of the things we appreciated here was that people kind of ebb and flow with the seasons, and that makes me feel a little more alive, more
Right,
part of it.
because and we always say this at the spring. It's like Italy comes back alive after the winter. Like the
Yeah.
changes of the seasons here are celebrated in what is kind of a subtle way, but it's not so subtle. It's constant. We can expect this almost this renewal every few months to a
Mhm.
whole
Yeah.
new thing, right? A whole new, not just weather, but a whole new bunch of food that we can choose from, new recipes, new clothes. Of course, we have to start. Oh, that's my chore next weekend is to put all of my summer stuff away. So we
Right.
have to, we have to fall. This is the lifestyle. I know that that drew you here and obviously drew me here and was drawing hundreds and hundreds of people as well. But when you're here, let's talk about what you're doing here now, because all that's nice, but how are you living here? Because you are still working, because you're here on a work visa, which
Right.
is because you're professional musicians, which I know you're still performing music, but you have this other thing that you're doing, which I want to talk about as well. And this is how I found you actually, was your Little Roads Europe, it's called, right? Little Roads
That's right.
Europe travel consultancy. So, and like I know you touched on it, that you really focus on these hidden gems everywhere. And when you're focusing on Italy, your goal is to help people, I guess, discover the same things you did.
Yeah, the same things or the same kinds of things. And we've been doing this travel consulting this way since 2014. I think we
Yeah,
started
I
the
think
business,
so.
so almost 10 years now.
Mhm.
And what will happen is the the would-be travelers will come to us and say, we want to visit Italy, and we saw what you guys do, watching your Facebook page or wherever they're seeing us, and we want to do something like that. And then we have them fill out a questionnaire to get an idea of what kinds of things specifically interest them, whether it's ancient historical sites, or whether it's strictly food, or whether it's particularly wine, or just landscapes, or people watching in small towns, or
Or
whatever it is,
all of the above.
or all of the
Or all the
above.
above.
Usually,
Yeah.
usually is when we say these things. Which of these things do you want? They say
Everything, all of
all of
it.
this. Yeah.
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 So then
And I want it all in
we
4 days.
yeah, right.
That's
Well,
right.
Yeah.
this is the problem, and this is part of what we do in our consulting is try to steer them to the idea that if they want to really sink in and appreciate a place and immerse themselves, like travel people like to say, um, have immersive experiences, right? You really have to have the time to do that. You have to have the time to sit with a coffee cup in front of your face, watching people for 2 hours in the piazza. If your idea is you want to get a feel for the life in a small Italian town or whatever.
Well,
Hmm.
people say often, they say, I want to meet people, I want to have interactions, and that's a, a fine goal, but you have to have time to do it. You
Yes. Yeah.
can't meet people, if you're on a hectic schedule, you don't have time to talk to that shopkeeper or that
Yeah.
cook. Then I mean, that's part of what we do, is help people with that. But back in the day, when we were just traveling ourselves, and we were posting online pictures and stories from our travels
Before we started the
before we
business, you
started
mean?
the
Hmm.
business, we would get just tons of inquiries of people saying, can you help me? Can you
Hmm.
help me plan a trip that looks exactly like this? And I used to plow like dozens of hours a week into helping other people make their trips. And then a couple of our friends who are business people, which we are not, um, and just kind of tapped us on the shoulder and said, "Hey, dummies, that's a business that
Hmm.
you have there.
Yeah.
That is a
You should
service
be
that you're
you should
doing.
be getting
You
paid
should
for this
quit
expertise and
quit
planning. Yeah.
volunteering, dozens of hours a week to do. I mean,
Yeah.
what are you doing?" And that was where we got the idea that we actually did have kind of a niche service. And as Matt said, that's about 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's evolved into, I certainly didn't imagine it when we started, but as when we started, our things that we were looking for were small towns, excellent food, to learn about the food of the area, the special ingredients or important ingredients of that area, and then find the best versions of them,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is in a Michelin starred restaurant or somebody's grandmother is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to learn some of the history of that area and then visit those sites or what are impactful sites to people there and just generally have a good time. So always in small towns.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were doing for ourselves. And then that is what we create for other people.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible service because there are a lot of people who really want to dig in. You know, of course, people come to Italy. If it's the only time you can come once in your life, you know, you're going to go to the big cities. You're going to go to the top 3, right? But if you've come back over and over, or maybe you're not as interested in that, you want to really, absorb the Italian way and maybe see it from a different side. This is such a great approach. Now, I know your specialty is finding these hidden gems that a lot of tourists, obviously general tourists, miss. So can you share one of the moments when maybe you stumbled upon something that was kind of unexpected and it felt like, wow, this is what we would do and what we would want to do?
Wow. Okay. There's so many. I know.
Do you mean like a particular type of location, or?
I can think of one right away. I mean, I could think of a lot, but here's
it's
a
hard
good
to narrow it
example.
down. Yeah.
On our honeymoon, we went to Rome and we ended in Venice, and it was Matt's first time out of the country. But we took a car after we left Rome. We took a car and drove ourselves up to Venice, and we ended up staying in a farmhouse that I found just outside of Reggio Emilia, in the middle of nowhere. And I believe that I picked that place partly because of it was a good halfway point. We were kind of edging our way up towards Venice. But anyway, I found this place and we wanted to kind of stay on a farm. And so after we slept there one night, we woke up and had breakfast with the woman, her name's Anna, in the morning, who owns the place. And she had put out a bunch of cakes and sliced meats and breads and things. But she was standing behind the counter and we said, well, is this what you eat for breakfast? And she said, no. And we said, well, what do you eat for breakfast? And she said, well, I eat Parmigiano Reggiano chunks and last night's Prosecco.
Yeah.
We said,
awesome
let's
breakfast.
That's what we're going to do.
Let's do that. Let's try that. And then I'll never forget, she tossed a little piece of cheese to her cat. And Matt just looked aghast because he was like, I'll eat it.
Because this is Parmigiano Reggiano.
Yeah.
A fairly well-aged one too.
And so for her, it was just a piece that was just maybe not, maybe just a little too brittle or something. So she gave it to the cat.
No, there was nothing wrong with it. I would have totally eaten that.
Then she asked,
but there was plenty. That was the point.
And we were obviously enamored with this cheese, and it was just a beautiful moment. And then she said, my friend works at this Parmigiano Reggiano cheese factory that is a mile away. Would you like to go there? Because we can do an impromptu tour. Mm-hmm. And I said, would we like to go there? Well, let me think about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and it was just it was a moment, and she is still someone we send people to now, all these years later. That was 19 years ago.
Yeah. And that's probably why you do what you do now, right? So that you can...
in large part, that kind of experience, because, we were very far away from any, never mind tourist locations, but anywhere that spoke English at all, very far away. And Anna had a very little bit of English, but
she did.
But the guy at the cheese factory didn't, and it was a very small producer. Yeah. And moreover, we had the time, or we made the time to have this experience that just cropped up out of nowhere, and so that really
And how long ago?
well, that was a series of lessons all compressed into that one experience, kind
Well,
of.
Right.
and I think it's because it started with us asking her who lives there, well, what do you do? What do you do? And
Yeah.
then, not necessarily what do you offer for tourists, but what do you personally do? I
Yeah,
want to try that.
Right. And how many
Mhm.
years ago was that, did you say?
That was
that was
2006.
2006, so
So
18
old.
years. Yeah,
Oh, 18. You see, what I hear from you in that, and what I think is what you're doing for your clients, which is so amazing, it's not just the experience in the moment, it's that it still touches you and affects you 18 years later.
Mm-hmm.
If you
yeah,
go to the Trevi Fountain, which I think everybody needs to see anyway, I mean, there are iconic places you have to see. You'll remember those moments, but you're not going to remember the moments like this, that when you're
Mm-hmm.
off into something more honest and real, those are the moments that will change you completely.
I couldn't agree more. And I know that sometimes our clients or maybe get a little deflated or bummed when they say something like, oh, I want to go to the beach in July. And we say, okay, well, let me help you understand what the beach is going to be like in July. So when we tell, that's part of what we do is tell them, for example, the Trevi Fountain, it's going to be very crowded. It's going to be. So when, Jane Fonda does a movie and shows it, they cleared out the whole piazza to put people there. It's not
Mhm.
going to look like that. It's going to be very crowded. And just to help prepare people for what the actual experience is going to be like. And then they can decide, you know what, I have to do it.
Right.
But it's better to know in advance and then be able to decide than it is to find out on the ground. So I know sometimes it's a little hard for people to hear that because what they're looking for either doesn't exist or perhaps doesn't exist at the time they're going.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's not necessarily what they want to hear. That's kind of the bad news. But the good news is there are so many experiences there that you haven't thought of and maybe didn't know about that are just waiting for you.
Right.
And so you don't have to repeat what you have seen in a show or in a magazine because there's so many places those magazines and shows just don't cover. And I think people might be under the impression that they're not covered because they're not good. And
Yeah, maybe,
that's not
maybe.
true.
No,
It's
it's not.
yeah.
Now, I know you focus on helping people, really truly connect with the local culture, but what's your secret? Like your secret in making these experiences so personalized and obviously unforgettable? How do you do
well,
it?
if it really were a secret, then we couldn't tell you, Samantha. But
Okay, so how do you find all these places? How about
I
that?
think, okay. Well, how do we find them? It's a tremendous amount of research ahead of time, and researching now actually is much easier online than it used to be in
Mhm,
2006 when we
mhm.
started traveling.
Hmm.
Uh, so there is a wealth of information out there, but that's also a downside because there's so much to sift through. But we, in fact, do the sifting through, and then we had the luxury when we lived in the States. We had the luxury of being able to organize getting over here several times a year, so we were able to explore a lot of different places, and not every place we went turned out to be a home run, of
That's true
course, too.
because often I find that the place that you see or you learn about is fairly accurately reflected online, but you'll find sometimes when you get to the place that there's some hitch that you uh, couldn't have known or wasn't explained online. Like, for example, this apartment is beautiful, but it's up 5 flights of stairs.
Right, right.
Well,
No
that
elevator.
is relevant. Some of our clients will say to us, I can't do a lot of stairs, or I need to have to be, I need to be able to get to a bathroom in some period of time. So saying like, oh, hey, all you have to do is go up these 5 flights of stairs. That's a non-starter. So something like that, or maybe you'd say, oh, once you get there, uh, you would realize that actually it's next to a paper factory, and so it has that paper
Paper
Hmm.
mill smell,
paper
yeah,
mill
yeah.
smell, or
Ah,
something
so
that wouldn't
nice.
be. So it's like things like that. That's why it's important that we go to the places ourselves, and
Yeah.
so that we know we can explain to people exactly what they're going to encounter, And because those logistics and those practicalities are important and do impact it. And what we're trying to do for ourselves and for our clients is to create a seamless kind of stream of experiences that are not manufactured, tour guidey type of things, but real places to go that are also, with the least amount of time standing in line or dealing with other logistics that are not fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so just trying to put all of that in there because it's just how we enjoy traveling ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is this what you're doing primarily now? Do you perform much music now? Are you still doing concerts?
Oh yeah, we do a lot of concerts. There's kind of it kind of ebbs and flows. Well, as does the travel consulting, because that's based on when the majority of people are going to be traveling, and likewise the concerts that we do an awful lot of stuff in the spring and summer, and we have a few events coming up as well in September, and then it kind of will fall off until the holidays in
Mm-hmm.
December, and then it'll surge again for a while. So it kind of comes and goes, uh,
Yeah.
like like any typical freelance work
That's
tends to.
true. And I
Sure.
mean, the thing is, we moved here 3 months before the pandemic. So all of the artistic ideas we had went right in the toilet because we had all these plans and things that we were going to be doing and people we were going to be bringing over. And, the cessation of worldwide travel and concerts being made illegal really put a crimp in that. So,
Just a little.
so all of our everything just changed. And one of the things we changed over the very long lockdowns was we said, I think we should probably play some weddings. Like weddings weren't happening then, but they were going to be happening. And when we first moved here, we definitely were not thinking about playing at weddings, but that has become a part of what we do as well. And then because of the skill set that Matt has, we are able to offer something unique, which is Matt arranges often for these weddings one or two songs, the favorite songs of the couple. So
Nice.
it is, let's see, it's our 19th wedding anniversary, which is,
Coming up
Oh,
in a couple of
yeah,
weeks. Well, we're
we're
doing
planning a wedding over in
congratulations.
Assisi, and the he's made two arrangements for this couple, and the exit music is Eye of the Tiger that we,
Oh,
we will be
by
playing.
Survivor. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So that's a little bit of an unusual
I was
example,
going to say that
it
isn't
is.
but
that.
it's very fun. We also did once.
I'm
I want
sorry,
to
but
hold your hand
I
too.
want to hold your,
That was
that
one
was
of
a
them.
little
Yeah.
bit more, but it's super hilarious to hear the cello go, dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun, dun. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's fun. So it's definitely a different life than we thought it was going to be when we moved, and not a small amount of the difference is because of changes that we had to think of over the pandemic.
Right.
But being flexible is certainly something that you need to do if you want to move to a different country.
Right. Yeah. Well,
So that's
it sounds like you have a really nice balance. Even though, people might think that travel planning is more like task type job. It's not. It's very creative because it's all about creating, like you had said, Matt, these experiences. So you've got this creative side with your music, which I'm sure feeds you a lot, right? I mean, in your
Yeah.
inspiration and your artistic world. And then, being able to, in a way, share these journeys with your clients, even if you're not with them personally, be able to put something together and have them say, wow, you changed my life there. This
it
this is
feels
a
very
trip.
creative while we're doing it because the way that when we're asking people, when working with them in the beginning and asking them what are they looking for, it depends on who they're with. I mean, we do a good amount of trips that are like honeymoons, and then obviously they're looking for romantic experiences or anniversaries. But we do a decent amount of like mother and son travel, or father and son travel, and then the type of experiences they're looking for. And they'll say something like, well, I would really like to do something with dogs or with animals, or some type of experience that is a bonding moment for those two.
Mm.
And or sometimes we do with also small children. And then here in Italy, they do have amusement parks, but not really. And so the type of events that families would go to is something the entire family could enjoy with
Yes, right.
small children,
So it's
or you could
different.
enjoy it as a couple as well. Like, for example, some castles, or there's a town I'm thinking of, Montevigioni, where
Yeah, it's a nice
um,
town, isn't it?
they
By
have
Siena.
a medieval armor museum,
Yeah.
and that's really fun to go to, where you can try on the
You
armor,
can put on the
you
chainmail and
know,
I
hold the
know.
axe.
I've
and
been
that's
there.
fun for kids, but that's also fun for just adults.
For
So
big kids like
it's
It's
me.
big
Yeah.
like
kids.
working with people to when they tell us what the types of experiences they're looking for, and we talk with them about some things that we could suggest that they may
Yeah.
not know about, and see if it appeals to them. And so then we craft that trip to be uh, around their preferences, and so that feels creative, because we're not just like churning out the same thing over and over.
Right. Everything's very
Yeah,
customized. Wow.
yeah.
Well, it's very inspiring. I think what you guys are doing is, it came from just something that you love, which is always much easier to do when you actually care about it. And when you've experienced everything yourself, it's like your friend told you, this is just a natural progression into another direction. And being able to do it in Italy in your new life here is, I'm sure, makes it even all that better. So we are going to put all of the links that you have shared with us in the show notes. So anybody listening who wants to talk to Matt and Zen about a potential tour can find their links there. And I know you also have guidebooks, and you have a memoir that you've written as well. And all of that I know, and a blog, because I've seen the blog lots of times. So I'm going to share all of that in the show notes as well. Is there anything else that you want to say before we say bye-bye?
We appreciate you giving us a chance to talk about what we're doing here a little bit.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to dream big, right? Because there's lots of things here that they can experience. I hope that you were as engaged as I was when I was talking to Zen and Matt, because I think that their love of travel really shines through, and of course, their love of Italy. But I want to talk to you a little bit more about how to actually travel like a local in Italy. So I'm going to give you some tips. The first one I would recommend is staying in a local accommodation. So rather than the big chain hotels, opt for an agriturismo, a farm stay, like the one that Zen talked about, or even a boutique hotel. This way you will get this really authentic experience, but you could also meet the local owners. They will give you a different impression of their life and what they do and how they live, as well as you're, of course, supporting local business. And then, of course, take your time, slow down. Slow travel really is the key. And one of the best things about visiting Italy is that it is a country made for slow travel, because other than the traffic, other than the way they drive, everything slows down here. So instead of trying to cram in as many sites as possible in your very short period of time, focus on spending more time in fewer places. This will give you a chance to really immerse yourself in the local country and the culture, and explore the area, on foot. This is a lot different than driving around in a car or in a tourist van. Of course, if you learn a little bit of Italian, then this will help you along the way as well, because these small towns, you will find less and less English speakers. And it can be fun to try to communicate, and you'll soon see that really words are only a very small fraction of what we use to communicate, but it will definitely elevate your, maybe reduce your stress level and elevate your experience if you can communicate a little bit. Also, I suggest you participate in local festivals and events. In Italy, they're called sagra. It's a sagra. And this is think of it like a block party. And it's usually put on by the community or by some kind of a group in the community. And it always involves food, almost always involves food. Of course, it's Italy. And depending on the time of year will be a different kind of food. So you sometimes will see polenta sagra or cingale sagra, which is the wild boar, or pasta. They're very regional, so it depends on where you are. But what's really cool about these places is you go in, they just set up a bunch of tents and, wooden tables, really like a block party. And you buy a ticket. It's usually, maybe 10, 15 euros maximum. You get a plate of food cooked by the community, and on a paper plate, and you sit down and you eat with everyone. And there's always a little bit of, some sort of maybe a little festival or show, and obviously dancing and these kinds of things. It's really fun. It's like a block party. And you can even just Google Sagra and in your area, wherever you are, and I'm sure you'll find something, and try to go to one at least once. And this leads me into the last thing that I want you to think about, and that is to explore the culinary culture. Italy, there isn't such a thing as Italian food, by the way. It's regional because every region you're in will have something a little bit different. And the best way to experience really the lifestyle is to dine in a local family-owned restaurant. Don't go to the touristy spots. And I know you've heard this a million times, but instead of thinking about it that you're going to get ripped off and get bad food, think about going to a local place to experience what the locals are eating and what it really costs to eat in a proper restaurant, how much a half a liter of wine or a glass of wine really truly costs, and how they really just enjoy each other, and how important a meal is to Italians. And this is why you should be going to family-owned restaurants, small local restaurants. It's not just because of the price, it's certainly because of the experience. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions, all left on our voicemail. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Hi, Sam. This is Mary Rose. Thank you for all your great information. It's really helping me. I'm planning my first trip to Italy to start looking around what areas best suit me. And I was wondering, are there any online banks that I could start putting money in as after I exchange it, where I can get interest? I would appreciate any help that you can give me, and thanks again for all you do.
Well, hello, Mary Rose. Thank you for the question. And your question is a really good one. A lot of people wonder about online banks and how to use them when you're traveling. Now, there's a couple things I always recommend. Number one is if you have you're just coming here for vacation or a few months and you just want to exchange or use euros instead of your ATM card or credit card, for example, you can open an account in Wise. Wise is like TransferWise. It's one of the more popular ones. You can do that right online, and you can open up a euro account. And what that means is when you deposit money into this online bank directly from your home bank, you can put it right into euros. You can also have a currency in USD, in Canadian, in Australian, whatever currency that you want inside. I know they have some currencies they don't have, but generally it's most of the common ones. And you can actually have different bank accounts holding those different currencies. So when you're in that country of currency, you just use the money with the debit card from the Wise to get that money. So for example, you would have a debit card from Wise, and when you're in Europe, you would use your Europe currency. When you are in Canada, you would use the Canadian bank inside, and you would use the US when you're back in the US. So it's a really great way. A lot of travelers use this when they're traveling and using different currencies. Interest bearing, no, it's unlikely because it is not a regular bank. So interest bearing, you will need to have perhaps a bank in Italy, which you won't be able to do until you have residency, or just keep it in your home country with a bank that is giving you a good interest rate depending on what your balance is. If you're planning to move currency across, like a larger amount, buying a car, buying a house, even actually paying monthly rent, I do recommend you go through a currency specialist. And the best one, the one that we always recommend because the service is so incredible and they save people honestly a ton of money. It is GC Partners, and I'll put the link inside of our show notes, but you can contact a girl named or woman named Rachel, and she helps all of our people with GC Partners. So I'll put the link in there. I hope that helps.
Hi, Samantha. My name is Giovanna, and my husband and I live here on Long Island in New York. And my question is this. We are returning to Italy in a few weeks and going back to the town in Tuscany, which we hope to find a long-term rental. But my husband and I were wondering, once you secure a long-term rental, is it up to the tenant or the landlord to take care of problems that might arise in the apartment? For example, problem with a faucet or a problem with a door or window. We've heard stories that maybe it's up to the tenant to take care of these problems. You know, unlike America, where the landlord usually takes care of them. Thanks for this question answered.
Hi, Giovanna. Yes, really great question. And listen up, it's a lot different here than it is to what you might be used to. The landlord tenant laws here, it's very much in favor of the tenant, but also there are safeguards for the owner as well. And one of them is that any major repairs like the caldaya, which is the heating system, so the water heater goes, or there's a major water leak, or an electrical issue. These are all major repairs. These are all by law the obligation of the owner. Anything else, a tap is leaking, the tap doesn't work, the window's squeaking, the doors don't work, the washing machine is broken. These kinds of things are almost always the responsibility of the renter. So the best way I explain it to people is when you rent in Italy, consider it more like your home, like that you own it and take care of it like it was yours rather than you're just renting it. And we see this quite often with foreigners when they rent property here is they tend to call the landlord or the owner for every little thing because that's what they're used to being able to do in their home country. But not here. The owner will just say, sorry, the tap is broken, fix it. Replace it. Unless it's, leaking and it's a major plumbing issue, then they are really not going to do anything for you. Now, there are some owners that are very good and really want to keep their property in top shape, so they will pay closer attention to you. But generally speaking, all of those minor repairs or any repairs due to just usage of yours is all your obligation. So including replacing the appliances if they're not working. So that is how it normally works. Again, before you sign a lease, make sure you have that super clear with the owner, what their obligations are. In law, however, they are obligated to do all of the major repairs.
Hi, Sam. My name is Heather. I had a question regarding the Golden Visa. How does that process work? And from my understanding, you invest in a startup in Italy. Is there some sort of list or email website that contains all of the small startup business that you invest in for the Golden Visa? Thank you.
Hi, Heather. The Investor Visa or the Golden Visa is an incredible visa. It's the best visa really there is to Italy, but it definitely costs money. It's a complicated visa to get because getting the information and preparing the application is a little bit tricky, and there's a lot of hidden information that you need. But generally speaking, people will do two kinds of investments. They will choose. One is either 500,000 euros. They buy shares in an Italian company worth 500,000. So either 500,000 in shares in Ferrari or Enel Energy, or Generali Insurance, something like that. They buy the shares and that will help qualify them for the investor visa. And when you're spending 500,000 euros, it can only be in one company. It cannot be in a fund. So you can only invest in one company, 500K. And you can actually take dividends on that, which is kind of nice. Now, the other level is the 250,000 euro level, and that is with an innovative Italian startup, which is a very specific designated company here in Italy. And typically that company has to meet some rules of the government in order to qualify. It has to be under 5 years old. It can't make more than 5 million euros. You will not be able to take dividend in your investment. And they have to be innovative in some way, shape, or form. There's a few other rules, but those are the general ones. Now, often the ones that the government has on the list have expired or they're no longer accepting investments. But some of them are still up to date. So you can go on the government website. We'll put a link in the show notes for you. And you can see what that list is. Again, just don't take it too seriously because it does it's often outdated. What we often do with all of our investor visas is we do the background of other investments. We have an investment lawyer who knows about all the startups for years, for decades here in Italy. So there's ways that you can do your background and your investigation to find other startups that fit your investment portfolio or what type of a business you're interested in investing in. I will say that some of the startups, are risky. It's a startup for sure. That's a risky investment. But there are some actually that are quite interesting here in Italy, and some of our investors have been doing quite well with them. So I hope that helps. Again, I'll put the link to the current list, in the show notes. So there you have it. And as we wrap up today's episode, remember that traveling like a local isn't just about visiting smaller towns. It's about taking the time to connect with the people in that town, with the culture, and the slower pace of life. So whether you're here for a vacation or you're here on a trip to consider moving here permanently, these experiences will give you a deeper appreciation for Italy's very rich heritage. And of course, its very, very warm hospitality. A New Life in Italy podcast is a production of Sentire Media, created and hosted by me, Samantha Wilson. Production by London Nero, and with special thanks to Ali Frothingham, Sofia Pisana, and the entire team at Sentire. Follow A New Life in Italy wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you're thinking of moving to Italy, whether full-time, part-time, or for a lifetime, come and see me over at smartmoveitaly.com and we'll help you get here and start living your best life. And don't forget, if you love this episode, please rate and leave a review. It's much appreciated. I can't wait to meet up with you again next week, same time, same place. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.